Hello, everyone, and welcome to this theater talk all about our Refocus Spotlight Artist, playwright William S. Yellow Robe Jr. Here at Roundabout Theater Company, our Refocus project aims to take a deeper dive into the lives and careers of artists who may be underrepresented or under-celebrated in the American theater. I am your host today, Daniel Sullivan, a teaching artist here at Roundabout Theater Company, and I am joined by two friends and colleagues.
I'm Jason Jacobs. I'm also a teaching artist for Roundabout.
And I'm Veracity Butcher, teaching artist, and I use she, her pronouns.
I am very glad to be in conversation with you today, especially about this playwright, because I know you both have personal connections to her. Before we learn a little bit about William S. Yellow Robe Jr.'s life and career, I wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge that he passed just a few years ago. And perhaps you could speak on that?
Just that we miss him, the community misses him, and rest in power, Bill.
Too soon, too young, but just what a privilege it is to be here and get to talk about him and honor him today.
Well, we're lucky to have you two here who knew him. So let's start at the very beginning, shall we? Could you speak a little bit about his early life?
Sure, let's start at the beginning. So Bill, as he is known by those of us anyone who worked with him, Bill was born in 1960 on the Fort Peck Reservation in Wolf Point, Montana. He was of mixed descent. He was of the Assiniboine and Nakota tribe, but he was also African-American descent as well. He grew up on the reservation. He loved reading and writing. I believe he wrote his first play in the 6th grade.
Yeah.
In the 6th grade?
6th grade.
Bill's parents, William S. Yellow Robe Sr. and Mina Rose Forrest Yellow Robe, neither of them graduated from high school, but both of them had a deep love of the written word, and they imparted that onto Bill. So he was in a very, very culturally rich household that was just infused with the love of the written word. His first play was in 6th grade, right? And he was kind of a child prodigy. Like everyone knew that Bill had talent. So when it got to the time for him to start making choices about college and all of that, his parents sat him down and asked him, if this was something that he was really serious about, if theater was something that he saw as a career path, and he said yes. And both of his parents encouraged him to leave the reservation in order to pursue that goal, because they knew that there weren't the opportunities for him there on the res, which is wonderful and generous, but also a little bittersweet, because it just so happens that neither of his parents got the chance to see his work actualized on stage.
That is tragic. Supportive parents of the arts, but yet they had to send him away in order to give him those opportunities, and then never got to see it fully realized. That is tragic.
Yeah, but Bill kept coming back. Bill kept coming back to the res and kept coming back to those stories,
And kept writing about it too, we know that.
His mother was a big source of inspiration. Many of the women characters in his plays are based on his mother.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So on those plays, this man was quite prolific. He wrote more than 60 plays, I believe, and many of them produced. What are some of the standouts for you? What are some of the titles we might know?
So some of the standouts would be The Star Quilter, Grandchildren of the Buffalo Soldiers, Sneaky, Thieves, Woodbones, just to name a few.
The list goes on and on.
There's 60.
And he's been awarded for these things. He's been recognized.
He won many awards, and some of just a few of the top ones are the Princess Grace Foundation Theater Award, the Jerome Fellowship. He has a National Endowment of the Arts Playwriting Fellowship, and then the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian named him as a Native Achiever.
Amazing. So very prolific, very well awarded, and yet still not a household name in the American theater, and that's why this Refocus Spotlight is so important to preserve his legacy. I admire this man, not just as a writer, but also because he spent a lot of his time teaching.
Yeah.
And I came across this one quote I would love to share with you, because it just says a lot about who I think he probably was. You'll tell me. He says, when asked why does he teach playwriting, he says, "I do it to expand the voice of Native people." He said he's tired of non-Native people writing about the Indian culture and spirituality of Native people and the general lack of awareness about Native people. Playwriting and all other art forms are political when people of color do it, because we empower ourselves. We take control of our past, present, and future. It seems like that's what he was trying to do, to take control of his, or his culture's, past, present, and future. You've both worked with Bill in various capacities. You at the very beginning of his career, is that right?
Very early in his career, and the very beginning of my career. It was really one of my first professional theater internships. It was at the Mark Taper Forum at their New Works Festival. And Bill was there having a play called The Pendleton Blanket, and it was getting a workshop, developmental workshop in this festival. It was 2 weeks of work with a cast, with some designers doing some very light design sketches on it. And my job as his assistant was to drive him around Los Angeles. So I sat in a lot of traffic with Bill and got to know him very well. And that's when, I just learned how gracious he was and how kind and friendly. And he would talk to me about his work. He would talk to me about my work and what I wanted to do. I was very new, obviously was just out of college. I also got to manage all his rewrites, and this was before laptops or cell phones or anything other than like those kind of wonky Macintosh computers. And so he would print out his pages, and then I would go and copy them and distribute them to everybody in the company and make sure everybody had the right version, because he was constantly rewriting every day. He was coming in with new scenes and new work on this. So it was really exciting to get to be there watching him create this new play. But what your quote makes me think about is how much Bill then was thinking about the community he was writing for. And we were working at a theater, the Mark Taper Forum is in Los Angeles. The actor pool is very much Hollywood actors. So we were working with Native American actors who were largely doing film and television. And really what that meant at that time was they were doing really stereotype roles in Westerns. And so these actors were not given a lot of opportunity to do realistic plays about real people on the reservations. That work wasn't being shown in film and television yet. Bill was writing these plays that nobody was seeing this world in. I felt like Bill was both trying to tell his story to his audience, but he was also creating opportunities for his community of actors to have really great, kind of awesome, juicy roles to play.
Wow, yeah. Admirable.
Yeah.
And a good story. You worked with him when he was a bit more established, I think, at the Public Theater?
Yes, I played Maria St. Germain Baker in Thieves at the Public Theater, and I played a character named Vera in Woodbones at Abingdon Theater, produced by Amarinda and the Eagle Project. It was such an honor to be welcomed into the community by Bill and all of our collaborators. Bill was a very big presence in the room, and he would be present frequently during rehearsals and just give his energy and give his notes and his guidance. And he would also be present at almost every single performance. So he'd show up, and prior to performance, he would facilitate a cast and crew prayer, essentially a moment to thank the Creator and to burn a little sage. And it was just such a meaningful moment that he would carve out for us to pay reverence to the ceremony that we were about to, as theater artists, perform.
Wonderful. You're both very lucky to have worked with him. The first play that Bill wrote, it was Sneaky in 1982. I guess he doesn't count his 6th grade play as his first. It was finally produced in 1987, and the Public Theater presented a reading of it in 1995, the first time it would be seen in New York. Sneaky is the play that Roundabout Theater Company has decided to launch our season-long effort into exploring his work. Sneaky will have a reading here at Roundabout in March of 2025, which is when we're filming this, but a whole season's worth of events will follow. Let's talk about Sneaky. This is a fast and furious play. It runs about 60 minutes. And my sort of superficial synopsis of it is a band of 3 brothers trying to decide how to handle their mother's funeral. She has passed, and they're debating whether to have a sort of culturally traditional burial or a casket burial. One would be illegal, and one would be, of course, traditional American and legal.
Yeah, illegal by white law, right?
Thank you. What a great point. Illegal by the white law of the time. So the theme of this thing really has to do with divine law versus human law, which takes precedence. There are some other themes in the play. Do you want to sort of call them out? Because they do seem to run through many of his plays.
Sure. So Sneaky delves really deeply into the idea of the afterlife, which I think is a recurrent theme in Bill's work. He also touches on life on the res, poverty, unemployment, assimilation, blood quantum politics. All of these sort of themes are braided through his work and all of his pieces. Sneaky itself is a 3-act play, right? And it, like you said, is fast and furious. A lot happens in those 3 acts. The play starts with fire and it ends with fire. And the whole dramatic question of how to bury someone according to their wishes feels like a very Greek, a very classic sort of question that Bill wholeheartedly tackles in a very Native American way. It is darkly funny. I would venture to say a bit hysterical. Like every line is a wink or a nod. And when you read it, but when you see it, I think it really becomes apparent. And it's really up to the actor to decide how to interpret this. There's a million different ways. And the beauty of Bill's characters is that they're human, right? So they're deep and they're complex and they're rivers that run underneath each of these characters, be they the alcoholic brother or the assimilated brother or the responsible eldest, right? And this play in particular is about their mother's burial. And recurrent in Bill's plays is also that mother character. I think there's an ode to his mother in almost every elder female that you see in his work. And you wanted to speak to a bit of the male characters as well.
Yeah, because I looked at this play and I read it in relationship to The Pendleton Blanket, which was the play he was working on in the 90s. That play is about 2 elders in the community, 2 older men, they're friends. A nephew of one of them is on the run from the law, and he shows up with an infant that he's got to leave with these 2 older men while he runs away. And so in both stories, I see the 3 brothers in Sneaky and these 2 men in the other play, and I look at it as looking at the male experience, particularly in reservation life. He's looking at men who are called on in a very oppressive situation to make decisions and be leaders for their families. And I look at Bill, Bill was this big guy, really tall and large and very masculine, and yet such a huge heart. And I think that he was really engaging in these male characters who are showing their vulnerability, showing their heart. And I see that across a lot of his plays.
And all of these characters to me are also just sort of different facets of Bill as a person as well. And to say that, many of his female characters are influenced by his mother, I would say a lot of his male characters were influenced by his father. And he credits his father for having this really sharp, biting sense of humor. And it's a very Native American sense of humor. It's an American Indian humor that is imbued through all of his work.
Now, with Sneaky, I've only seen it on the page, but it seems like there's a lot of physical hijinks allowable in this script also.
Yes.
It's funny.
It's
like dark farce.
Yes.
There are times, when these 3 characters are handling the body of their mother, and there are references to necrophilia that seem really dark when you talk about them now, but are actually hysterical in the context of Bill's voice, and that's Bill's voice. It's just his ability to take these really, really grave stories and bring the levity to that.
That's great. One of the reasons that the Refocus project exists is to lift plays like this, get them out into the world again, and this one is very highly producible. We want everybody to be producing this next season, don't we?
I also see Bill's work, and I've told him this, that in a very cinematic way. Bill's aesthetic was super realistic. I would call it realism. Even though there were so many references to spirituality and there were characters in his plays that were ghosts, Bill's world and the reality that he created generally, dramaturgically, was a very hyper-realistic world. And so that really lends itself to cinema. And I think this play, starting with fire and ending with fire, having fire on stage is always a little problematic, but it's that gateway, right, between the theater and ceremony, and also between what is real and what is presentational. And Bill's aesthetic is just hyper real, and I always wanted to see one of his plays become a film, always.
Wonderful. So here at Roundabout Theater Company, we'll be producing a reading of Sneaky this month, March 2025. What do you think Roundabout audiences will learn about Bill, his work, or life in general?
Well, what I look at, looking back at Bill's work, was it was so much based in community. We didn't even get to mention his own theater company that he ran starting in 1997, the Wakikanabe Intertribal Theater Company, which was a mixture of professionals working with non-professionals. And he was trying to make theater for Native American people by Native American people. He wasn't really pursuing white theater spaces. He wanted to do theater that his mother could see herself in. So I look at the work, the devotion to telling stories of his community and representing his community. You know, there isn't a Tony Award for best community-facing artist, but I feel like if there was, I would want to give that to Bill, and I hope we'll see that when we get to look back at his work now.
Well said.
Yeah, and to go with that, I think Bill has said many times he wasn't doing playwriting to become this notable playwright that he eventually became anyway. He was doing it for community, so much so that before he was published, you know, he would receive a lot of rejections, and folks at his plays would ask, his audience members would ask, like, where can I get your play? And he would disseminate copies that he had printed out on his own. Just that was the generosity of spirit that he had. So to answer your question about what I would love for audiences to receive from this Refocus season, it would be just an impression of how fierce Bill's humanity was and what a fierce champion of human rights he was. One of the things that he said that really resonated with me was, as artists, we must speak for those without voices. And I think he was doing that with his work. He was speaking for marginalized, disenfranchised, oppressed people within his tribe and within indigenous communities across the world. So his humanity was just so expansive and so welcoming and so generous and so universal.
We are so lucky to have you both here today. Your love for him is obvious, and his artistic quality is obvious when we read it. Thank you for sharing your love and lifting his spirit. And for all those out there who want to learn some more, please visit the Roundabout Theater Company website, specifically the Refocus Project section. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.